JooBee, a great place to start this conversation, I think, would just be if you could introduce yourself. Who are you? What's your background? What do you do?
Sure. So I am Joo Bee. I was born and raised in Malaysia. Just a little bit about myself first. I love food. I hate exercise. I have a melting pot of career. I've worked as an engineer, a consultant, a HR leader, and I found that my sweet spot in my career is in scaling startups. So I've grown businesses at the rate of growth of 15% year on year, 15% quarter on quarter, to 15% month on month growth. It was crazy, but exciting. I went independent a couple of years ago. So currently I'm an advisor to startups, writer, speaker, and educator, because I can't decide what I want to do.
Oh, you're one of my favorite type of people. If you can't decide, you can have the best conversations with those people. So I am really looking forward to this. So maybe then next place to go is, how did you get into the world of people and culture in startups and scale-ups? You mentioned being an engineer. So just take me through that journey.
By accident. I have to admit, I didn't grow up saying, this is what I will do. But I did grow up with a strong belief that as long as you learn and you grow, you can achieve anything you want. Very broad. And also in my culture, the career, your parents will steer you into your career. And usually the three choices are to be a doctor, an accountant, or an engineer. So that's how I ended up as an engineer. But one thing I did notice during that time was I'm very curious. And I did notice that, many times amazing colleagues who are engineers, amazing engineers, when they're promoted into management, they are not exactly the best manager. And that has a huge impact on business and, people around. And I remember thinking at that time, that's the problem I want to solve. So instead, at that time, I had two offers. I had offered to do a PhD in AI. Very different career path if I did. But instead, I did a PhD in leadership development. And the squiggly career journey started. I went into consulting and working for top customized leadership development firm. And they are ranked top 3 in the world by Financial Times. I get to work with FTSE 200 clients. It was a dream come true. Then the next problem popped out. I noticed that, the system, so the organization itself is not conducive for supporting leaders to embed what they learn, even though we know that this learning and new behaviors are absolutely crucial to drive business growth, business transformation, or innovation. So I joined the system and I went into Schibsted, the 3rd biggest classified company in the world. I work across different HR roles, trying to enable the organization to embed learning and change so that the business can achieve its goal. But a big system, as we know, takes longer to change. So when the company that is 200 years old decided to spin off a part of the business to be more agile, behave like a startup, and with a mandate to build the system from scratch, I jumped at it, and that's the beginning of the startup journey. And of course, new problem came up in startups, particularly one that is scaling really fast, which is how do you enable, startups to learn, unlearn, relearn faster as they move through different stages of growth and the need to adapt to the new business and people challenges at these different stages. So that's the journey of by accident, although there is a red thread across, which is I always chase to solve a challenge, and how can learning and change enable us to do what we want to do next.
I think it's really interesting listening to your story, common thread with some of the other conversations I've had in this series, people who start trying to solve this problem in a big system and who get really enticed into that startup scale-up world because the recognition that it's a systemic problem and wanting to build from scratch, there's something really satisfying about that. which probably leads me on to my next question, which is how you've worked across multiple teams in lots of different HR positions. How do you make that choice about which teams to join?
That I have to admit, I thought about it. I always think about it when I change job as well. So if I reflect across, the whole journey, I would say that what I look for in a company evolve across my career journey. So I'll be quite open and honest about that. So for example, earlier in my career journey, when, I'm just establishing myself and building my experience, I want a company that pays well because I have to move to London. And a really weird one, I remember thinking, I really want a company that allows me to travel around the world for my job. And dare I say, fancy title, opportunity for promotion, and a big company name, one that is recognized. But around the middle of my career journey, I would say, when the hygiene needs are met, so, paid fairly, had, opportunity for promotion, have reasonable brand name in my CV, and gain, the fundamental experience in my career, what becomes important next becomes different. Mm-hmm. So I want to solve interesting problem, one that I can stretch myself. So I would say around the middle stage of my career, the decision that I will make to join a company is to be able to take on role that allow me to experiment the culture, the role, and deepen my expertise, broaden my perspective, and working with people I can learn from. And as I mentioned early in my career, I was chasing promotion during this stage. Actually, across that journey, I took 2 steps down and back, which, is conversation as HR leader, I talk about a lot with people, squiggly career. And I won't talk about it if, I didn't live through it and know it can be painful. Yeah. But knowing what you want is important, right? And at that stage, I really want to gain experience in 2 areas of HR that I've never done. And the payoff is later. It won't be now because, you take pay card and title card and it's painful, but the experience will then, and it did for me, accelerate my growth later down the line. And
sorry, carry on.
No. Then towards the end, I hope I'm not at the end of my career, towards the later stage of my career, nearer to now, when I feel that I have more experience and skills to offer, then I am more selective of who I work with. So particularly the founder, of course, the foundation of, great culture, great purpose, all of that. But the one thing that I would definitely look for is the founder that I work with, because every other problem is possible to be resolved. But if a founder do not believe that HR can enable an organization through its people to achieve the business goal, then it is a hard no, because all I will be doing is putting out the fires resulting from that belief.
Yeah. And we know many HR leaders who spend their lives just putting out fires, and it's not a place many people enjoy being. So I want to just dig into one aspect of your decision making through your career, which I haven't asked about in the preparation. So
okay, go for it.
And that's just the role of personal confidence in switching that mindset of yours around how you are making decisions about what next. So moving from a place of salary, travel the world, title, promotions, to one that's about fair salary, experience, gaining expertise, depth of knowledge. At what stage did you feel comfortable kind of reframing your decisions in that way? And what was the role of confidence in terms of in doing that? So trying to help other people, culture, and HR leaders who maybe are earlier stages in their career to think about their own decision making. So what went through your mind?
what is important to me now, as well as what is important for me in the future. So, for example, if I'll use another story actually to illustrate this. So, for example, every job that I take, I make sure that it's something new that I will be doing. And that depends on what you want, right? So, for example, I consciously never go into recruitment because it's not something I want to do. But for example, I went into people partnering because I want to understand the problem, although I decide I'll never be a people partner again. But it was a very valuable decision to definitely try that. So I remember, and this is the part, sometimes you might, I number one, have people around you to talk through. So don't do it yourself, because I had a lot of people to talk through and play back what I talk when I'm trying to make that decision. So for example, about years ago when Monzo was at its peak, where everyone wants to join Monzo, and I want to join Monzo as well. The culture sounds amazing. So I applied for the role, and the two offer that I was considering was Monzo and Culture Trip. And it was a no-brainer. When I went in, I thought, if I get Monzo, of course I'll do it. But understanding the role, I realized I'll be doing the same thing. Even in the conversation where I discussed with them that they should pivot the role, they pivot, but it's still something I've done before, where I also want in Culture Trip. I haven't. And it was painful, because why wouldn't I want to work for a company where I admire so much a lot of the things that they do, versus a company at that time, was not as well known, but the challenge and the problem to solve is different. And so that's, for me, I always choose the problem I want to solve, and then how does the problem, pieces by pieces, build into the bigger picture of what you want in the future.
Yeah, so what I hear in that is, as long as you are clear in the piece of the story that builds for you, that next step, then you have a way of then it's valuable to you, because you have a way of articulating it to others, and future roles, you can explain those steps. Whereas maybe the safer route is pick the brand name, because that might sell itself. But ultimately, if you get into a conversation, you have about a future opportunity, you're always going to be able to explain the past decisions that you've made, and the more thought that you've put in them, the less you need to rely on the big brand name to sell yourself.
I will be even, I won't even worry about having to explain it, because yes, you can explain it in an interview, but if you do the job and you actually can't do it, that explains even louder.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
And it's I am really, really aware, because as HR leader, we also coach, people thinking about that. You coach your friend thinking about that. The hardest decision will always be the brand name, the salary, a better salary, a bigger title. And then, the thing that we should really, really focus on is, what does it give you? Also on because the first three are more, I would call extrinsic motivation. Don't forget your intrinsic motivation.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, now we've given some people some career advice. I want to dive into the sorts of problems that we try to solve in companies. And maybe a good place to start this conversation is, when you join a new startup or scale up, or you start to help a new business for the first time, are there sort of common challenges that you started to recognize, or you see a pattern in terms of what you face, and what are those? You're nodding vigorously.
Yes. So I will start with the one where I am at, which is scaling startup. And startup, the same thing that startup goes through over and over again is the stages of growth. And there are broadly 6 stages. And at each stage, there are different challenges that needs to be overcome for a startup to continue to grow. And if they can't overcome that, that's where, you see startup getting stuck and they can't make progress. And what I notice in startup is that they seldom stay ahead of the growth curve. Most often, they are not even aware that they have hit an inflection point in that growth journey. So That's why I write about it, so that, you know, we can be more prepared of what's coming next.
Yeah, I mean, we could dive into each of those inflection points in each of those stages, but we'd probably be here for a very long time. So
and that's why I wrote about it.
Yeah, so we can share a link to JooBee's article when we share this as well, so you can get more of the detail on that. And then maybe a less cliched question: has anything surprised you when you've joined a new business that you thought, oh, I wasn't expecting that so much?
I don't know. I thought really hard about this. Luckily, none that I go, oh my God, I didn't expect this. Usually it's similar. It's just there will always be challenges, and it's more of, you know, the degree of the challenge. But actually, we're going to add more career advice here. Why I don't think I'm surprised is because I've been doing this a lot. People looking for new role. When I, let's say, interview, during the interview process, I really do my due diligence. Mm-hmm. It's not just asking the direct question during the process, or, you know, connecting with people who works there. I remember one time I even said, I don't think I've met enough people. Here's the list. Can you choose 3 people from roughly this role to meet? The due diligence is key, so that you are never surprised, because it's a huge decision to, you know, to let go of what you might enjoy currently and go into a new environment. The thing to remember is sometimes it's easy for us to go, oh, I really want that job, or, you know, I really would like to work for the company. Then we are trying to convince them, you know, why they should hire us, versus they should also convince us. So provide us with the information to help us make that decision. And therefore, then you won't have as much surprises. But what I do find more of a surprise is when I leave a company, and how the relationship built, you know, during the time with the company continue on years and years later. And the support, the network, truly the friendship that's continue on from there.
That, I mean, to me, sounds like you've chosen the companies that you work for really well.
I won't say all are perfect. All of it has its challenges, but it's the people that make a company, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. That's a really lovely surprise to find. So, JooBee, what do you see as the opportunity for startups and scale-ups if they get their culture right?
I'll start that with answering the question of what is culture? As in a very simple way to explain it, is culture is the way we do things around here, whether it's a company culture, country culture, community culture, etc. And I have once heard culture described as the operating system that your company runs on. Here comes the geek heads up. Most of us use laptop, and, you know, what do we see when the operating system or the OS starts to break down? So, you know, in company, when culture breaks down, our laptop will start to slow down. So it takes longer to reboot. It takes longer to process, you know, an action such as opening a browser or a file. And it also becomes unreliable, and eventually it frustrates the user, you. And I am the worst nightmare for my partner, who actually is in tech. It drives him up the wall, because I will be there clicking, click, 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 click. It doesn't work. It's so slow. So same thing happens, you know, when culture breaks down in a company. Performance starts to slow down, output becomes, you know, or performance become unreliable, and eventually it frustrates your customer, it frustrates your employee. So your question of what opportunity for startup or scale-ups if they get their culture right. In other words, if, you know, they get their operating system right, better performance, more reliable results, and happy customers and employee.
Yeah, I love that analogy of sort of the laptop operating system. I think it's a perfect one to think about when thinking about culture. So I want to move us on to how you, JooBee, try to solve the problems of people and culture in businesses. So what is one, I don't know, expertise, skill, toolkit that you bring to the problem of building fantastic cultures?
I am not sure if it is skill that I bring or sheer stubbornness.
You'll need a bit of that.
The sheer persistence to find and solve, the root cause of the challenge or the problem. And as you know, to build great culture, you might, it's about identifying what is needed. And in startups, usually we move really fast, and that's what we love about it. But the challenge I notice as well is the tendency for people to jump into solutions before understanding the problem. So, for example, when we're trying to build a great culture, and we might hear things like, oh, we need to build, we have to have better goal setting. Let's roll out OKRs. We want people to be happy here. Let's give them well-being day. We need stronger leadership. Let's send them for leadership training. And what follows really quickly is how to execute on the solution. A project team will be put together to start to scope out the work, conduct tool or vendor evaluation, plan milestones, conduct weekly project meetings. But if we take a step back, I'm not saying, the solutions are usually wrong, but what I'm trying to say is, how do we know that is the best solution? Do we actually know the problems we're trying to solve? So I hear things, if I ask that question, normally I hear things like, this is the industry best practice. Yeah. I have 20 years of experience doing this. In my last company, we did this. Company X implemented that and it works. But none of the answers, demonstrate an understanding of the problem within the current context. Mm-hmm. So instead, it tells me that we assume other people's solution works for us. And you know what the saying is about when people assume. I was like, I'm not saying that because these
not an X-rated webinar series.
And when we don't understand the problem, we miss solving the right thing. So if we were to take an example, let's say your stakeholders want leadership training for the managers. Don't solutionize immediately and start thinking, how are we going to train the managers? Ask why. Why does our manager need training? And the answer that I usually get is because they need to be better leaders. That's not enough to solve the problem. So if we ask another question, why do they need to be better? What is missing? Your stakeholder might say they need to run better one-to-one, or give feedback to their team. Still at this point, don't run off and develop a workshop for one-to-one and feedback, says the L&D person. Probe more, because you don't know what you will get unless you ask more questions. So what is important? Why is it important to run one-to-one and give feedback to their team? Because they need their team to perform better. Okay. Why is their team not performing now? Because the managers are not holding their people to account. People are starting to miss deadline. You're starting to get to the problem. Yeah. And you can continue asking, what else is happening? Oh, other team members who are performing are grumbling and I worry they might leave. Another problem. When we start to, get to the root cause of the problem, we start to understand the problem. It evolves to what initially the ask is, and the first solution might not apply. So that's why I'm a huge fan of product development, UX, and agile approaches, where you put the users at the center of the problem solving and the reason why we do what we do. And the HR team is unique, where we sit in the intersection between business and people. And we need to remember we're not solving only the business problem, which HR used to tend to do, or only people problem, but achieving the synergy in solving both business and people needs or problems. And that's so that our customers, which is both business and people are able to find the best solution. So back to your question of, what do I rely on to build great culture in a scaling business? Is the laser focus to solve the right problem. And I do this by putting our customers, which are both the business and the people, at the heart of the problem solving.
I love that explanation. And I also, in listening to you go through that, one of the things it made me reflect on is the extent to which that questioning and probing process actually is part of the solution.
Yeah.
As in, it might sound daft, but in asking those questions of the senior leaders, of managers, of people in the business, you are challenging them to think about what are the real problems that we're facing, and just getting them to think about it actually helps to solve a lot of it. Whereas if you jump straight to, we need a training program to solve this, nobody engages with the problem, and so they attend the training, but it's not attached to any problem really, because nobody's been made to think about it. So it may feel like you're not doing much. you're not coming with the solution, but actually that process is a big part of moving things forward. So that was just a reflection I had.
Is because sometimes we also see, and it's not just, to be honest, it's not just people team or HR team, it's also in other teams, because you go, okay, we have this problem, we have this solution, and then throughout the time that we're trying to implement the solution, we're picking at the solution. This bit doesn't work, that bit doesn't work, and then the solution becomes some average solution that is not even solving the problem, because we're talking about the solution rather than the problem. There is a quote actually that I absolutely love. Can't believe Einstein said that, or actually I can. I think he said something along the line of, if I have 1 hour to solve a problem, I will take 55 minutes to understand the problem. Because when you do, the solution just comes to you so much quicker as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you've started a new role as somebody responsible for people and culture in a business, how have you started to sort of prioritize what you do? What's your approach?
So usually when I join a startup, they usually already have a product market fit, and most likely, have received funding and is gearing towards working at scale. So that's usually the stage where I tend to join a startup. So they need to work at scale because they need to deliver more of what they do to the customers to expand their market share or revenue. At this stage, the startup need to grow the operation of the business. So for example, increasing headcount, expanding into new geo, adopting new system or ways of working so that, it can enable scale and so on. Also at this stage, startups usually would have built a good culture to get to where they are. And what founders normally want to do is preserve this culture and not wanting to lose it, and actually want to amplify it at scale, just like, business at scale, culture at scale. So what I normally do when I join the startup is I talk to as many people as possible to understand and evaluate the 6 foundations, I call it, at company level. The 6 foundations are the strategy, the capability, the structure, process and systems, data and ways of working. This foundation looks different at different stages of growth, and to understand, do we have the foundation that is needed to work at scale? So from there, I would work with leadership to prioritize which foundation at the company level we need to have in place now and what is needed next, to avoid hitting, again, inflection point where the absence of these foundations become a blocker to growth and will slow us down. So that's at company level. Same thing, I will use the 6 foundation framework to evaluate the HR function. Do we as a function have the strategy, capability, structure, process and system, data and ways of working to support the business in building the company level foundation in order to transition to the next level of growth? So it's usually within, these are the 6 foundations that I will evaluate, and the priority depend on the business where the gap is biggest.
And do you see a pattern in which of those 6 foundations is maybe more important? I mean, I know there'll be different elements of those foundations at the different stages of a company growth, but in terms of earlier on and later on in a stage of growth, which ones you dial up at what speed to support a company, or is that totally context dependent? Is it different in every company that you work in, or actually is there a pattern to startups and scale-ups that you've noticed?
There might be a bit of pattern, and I'll try to unpack this a little. We might then need to bring in the 6 stages of growth. So if we look at, phase 1 where everyone does everything, and when you hit about 50 people, that's when most likely, if we only use headcount, there are other variables as well. When you hit 50 people, you start to split in terms of specialism. So rather than one person trying to do everything, you start to have, head of sales, head of people, head of tech. And then at that point, the foundation that needs to be in place is your capabilities, your structure start to change. And then actually capability structure, it's just in different flavor, because even when you go to phase 3, when the team becomes bigger, one manager is managing too many people, you start to have middle level management. Again, it's capability and structure.
But a different flavor.
Yeah, and then ways of working start to come together, because like say, even if you take communication, we're going to tell everyone everything together. You can't, because the organization become bigger. So you might go, we tell everyone everything during all hand, and then we cascade through people, in different ways, maybe in Slack, newsletter, whatsoever. It start to look different. So the process start to look different. The ways of working start to look different. The system that you use to do that might start to look different. Data should always be there, ideally. So yeah, these 6 foundation in various flavor, actually in every stage.
Yeah, I guess I was just really interested. Yeah, I mean, devil's in the detail, right? And as you dive into it for any one company, there'll be things that you could talk about for ages.
It will be, the 6 are always there in some shape or form that needs to evolve.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, advice time. What's one piece of advice that you would give to others who are responsible for shaping the people and culture agenda in a startup or a scaling business?
So we talk about, solving the right problem.
And
we talk about, solving it with the right, right frame, which is, put your user customer at the center of solving that challenges. The next one is, don't try to solve everything right now. It's all very simple advice, but we try to do so much. And priority is absolutely important. So, you need to know what you need to solve right now, next, or if it's possible. Sometimes some things are nice to have. So, whichever problem you choose to solve now, it usually, you take, I think there are 3 ways you can test it, if you like. Test it in terms of priority. This is why we need to do this now. You have a reason for that now instead of later. And second one is, how does it align to every other part of the business? Not because we feel like it, because we are all working towards a common goal. And then what focus will you, or where will you invest your effort to create that value for people and the business? So priority alignment and focus to decide if you're going to do that now.
I love those 3 questions. I think that's really helpful. Because when you're working in a role like this, there's too much to do. There is too much to do. I mean, any role that you do in a scaling business is always too much to do. So identifying the one thing that you can do that's going to move you forward is really important, and having a structure to the way that you make that decision, I think, is really valuable. So those 3 questions are, yeah, really helpful. Good advice. And moving on to you personally, where do you see yourself in sort of 3 years' time from now?
Well, we started this conversation today with the problems I was solving across my past career. It's only befitting for us to talk about problems I want to solve going forward. So the problem that I would love to be able to solve, or the challenges, is to help multiple startup. Previously one when I'm in-house, so now I want to do multiple startup at the same time to navigate and anticipate blockers at different stages of their growth journey to avoid slowing down the performance. I want to help accelerate the development of leaders and managers in startup. And I want to help HR folks build better, faster, more fulfilling startup. That is the what. The how, I'm still figuring it out. But one I do know is I always believe in making knowledge accessible. So I am going to be hopefully writing more blogs, doing more talks, open sourcing the people products that I built. And therefore, if you're listening and you want to be kept updated, do add me on LinkedIn, where I share my new contents and events.
Amazing. Well, it sounds like there's we're all going to get to hear a lot more from you, which I think is, in my view, only a good thing, rather than, you being selfishly held by one company at a time. So that's really exciting to hear. We'll share when we share this, we'll share some links to some of the stuff that you've been releasing recently, because I think it'll be really interesting to the audience. But thank you, Joo Bee. I've absolutely loved this conversation. Thanks for your insight, and just the structured way that you think about what is a very messy problem at times. And I think helping people to bring a sense of structure, priority, decision making to navigate this messy world is really, really useful. So thank you, Joo Bee.
Thank you, Bee.